Hi and welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about the basic flow of the Summa Theologica. Maybe you've never picked it up before and you just want to kind of know what is it about. Well, I'll try to explain this as briefly as possible with some pictures. And the first thing to understand about the Summa is that it is about our life's journey. And interestingly, St. Thomas Aquinas starts at the very beginning of the Summa, the first article, by explaining that not only do we not exactly know where we are headed, but also we cannot get there on our own strength. Okay, and so that leads very quickly into many questions in the first part of the Summa about God, starting off with question 2: does God exist in the first place, and can we prove that he exists? And then the attributes of God, his simplicity and infinity and immutability and perfection and goodness and unity. Okay, so these kind of his knowledge, his power, his will. Also the Trinity, that God is a communion of persons that interact and have relations and notions and a fascinating procession within the Blessed Trinity. And so really Thomas is setting up here that this is really our goal. This is our end, to come to know God. In fact, there's a very important question early on in the Summa about man's knowledge of God. And this is really a foretaste of what Thomas is going to get at throughout the entire Summa, is that this is the goal. This is the purpose of our life, is to know God. Interestingly, of course, God is invisible. The Blessed Trinity has no body. And of course, it assumed a body with Jesus Christ, but the Trinity itself has no body. But interestingly, we live in a physical world. So Thomas has what's called the Treatise on Creation. So now all of a sudden, what we all know is that there is a world around us that we see and sense and taste and touch, and sunsets and sunrises and butterflies and dogs and squirrels and earthworms and all these things, countless different creatures. Well, what's the point? Well, Thomas says they're all telling us something about God. Since we can't see God, we have to use what we can see, what we can sense, and that is the created world. Now, part of the created world that we can't see are these fascinating creatures called the angels. They are entirely incorporeal, no bodies, but they have intellect and will. And what's the point? Why are there angels, and what role do they have in our life and also in our eternal salvation? Okay, so this kind of sets the stage for Thomas's treatise on human nature. And this is really a very extremely important part of the Summa, because we are right in the middle of it all. We've got what Thomas calls the brute animals, the goats and the squirrels and the porcupines and the whales. And then they're all here. And then above us, we've got the angels, which we have a lot in common with. And we have a lot in common with the brute animals as well. And we have quite a bit in common with God. But we're right in the middle. And we have body, soul, we have spirit, we have passions, we have appetites, we have intellect, we have will. We're very interesting, complicated creatures caught right in the middle of the whole story of creation. And in the beginning, Adam and Eve had what's called original justice, original innocence, where it was almost heavenly. It wasn't heavenly, but it wasn't heaven, but it was heavenly. The reason and the passions were in total accord. And of course, eventually that is all going to get lost. But that's a little bit of a foretaste of heaven, Thomas' description of Adam and Eve. All right, so we get into a section of the Summa about, well, what exactly is our end, okay? We want to be happy, but we can kind of be happy with food and fame and power and popularity and money and physical pleasures. But Thomas says that's not ultimately what's going to make us happy. It's got to be something else. It has to be something that lasts, that we don't continue to desire more and more and more of. All right, so that's kind of the situation, is that we're wounded, we have concupiscence, we have a tendency to sin. We know that there's this ideal Adam and Eve situation that was lost through original sin. And then there's a big section of the Summa about human actions. Now that we're in this world and we're wounded and we've got all these good things surrounding us and things that we tend to overuse or abuse, and how are we going to get to God? If God is our end, how are we going to get there? Well, Thomas talks a lot about the virtues, the cardinal virtues, the theological virtues, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. He talks about sin and falling short of our goal, and justice and temperance and prudence and habits and all these the Beatitudes, and how they all kind of help us understand our final end, and not only understand it, but how are we going to get there in the first place. Thomas is very clear that none of this is going to be possible without God's grace. Remember, I said a moment ago that our end is beyond us. We are not capable of reaching our final end. Therefore, God has to intervene through his grace, which is a gift, right? A participation in the life of God. He helps us. And also through the gifts of the Holy Spirit, which are supernatural. The theological virtues are supernatural. So they're all helping us to get to this final end, which is beyond ourselves. Now, the best way that God helps us to reach our final end is through the Incarnation. Okay, this is how the third and really final part of the Summa begins, is Jesus Christ being born into the world. He lived, he suffered, he died, and he rose again, okay, opening up the gates of heaven for us. And then he not only rose into heaven, but he also left behind a system of sacraments whereby we can receive sanctifying grace through physical things and then words as well, form and matter, sanctifying grace, helping us to reach our final end. And that's how the Summa ends, is talking about the last things, the resurrection of the body, and death, and heaven and hell and purgatory and judgment, and what exactly is our heavenly experience going to be like if in fact we ever are blessed enough to get to it. So that is a very, very brief description of the flow of the Summa. If this sounds interesting and intriguing to you, I invite you to continue watching these videos. Go back and watch a lot of the old videos, and also comment and let me know what's most exciting for you about studying the Summa Theologia by St. Thomas Aquinas. God bless you, and thank you.